Okay. Sweet. So today we're going to go over choosing your market and really what I do and kind of how I break it down when you're starting off and trying to figure out what market to get into. Um, so I think this is really important. It's also something that was kind of brought up and asked as well a few times. And so let's go ahead and tackle this one today. Next week, we'll probably dive into lead sources. Steve, I know that you really want to kind of dive into that as far as like lead gen. But before we can start diving into lead gen, we first have to understand what market we're going to be in. And so that is why we're going to dive into this one today together. Go Beans. Alrighty. So, okay. Oh, darn it. There we go. Awesome. So, why is it like super important to understand what market you're getting into? Because one of the early lessons I learned getting into real estate, this is actually coming from my first deal or the first property I ever got under contract. So, when I first learned about real estate and when I first learned about wholesaling, I immediately just like dove in YouTube University hardcore and I took action. And so I took up some, or I took quite a bit of cardboard boxes. I cut them all up into these just little squares and I wrote on them, I buy houses cash. And I put a Google Voice number on there because I didn't want, to put my personal number on there for, I guess, to keep, stay safe, I suppose, so I don't get called from like police or city or anything. So use a Google Voice number. Anyways, I took these cardboard boxes and placed them all over town. Now, the town that I was doing this is a little tiny town called Rockdale, Texas, where the population is just maybe 10, 15,000 people. It is super, super small. Not the greatest market at all to do wholesaling real estate, period. But I didn't know any better. And I just like dove in and I just straight went for it. And I actually got my first lead from those bandit signs. And it was a guy named Kit and his family. They had the biggest house on the block. And I thought that was like a golden nugget. I was like, yes, I got the biggest house on the block. This is a great opportunity. I was so excited. I learned two very important lessons that day. Well, really three, but we're going to focus on two. One, location is the one of the most important parts of getting a deal sold. It doesn't matter how many deals you lock up or how many deals you get under contract. What matters is how many deals you're able to get to the closing table because that is how you get paid. Okay. That is important. And location plays a very, very, very big role in that. So when I got this property under contract, when I was trying to dispose the deal, I couldn't find anybody for it. And I mean, I was hammering my phone left and right, day in, day out, trying to get people to get interested in this property. But it was the location. It wasn't the numbers necessarily, it was just the location. And so, long story short, after about 2 weeks of an option period, we had to call it quits because I could not dispose the deal. And I ended up losing my EMD, which was only $100, but it was such an important lesson because it taught me, man, stay the hell away from rural areas because it is going to be an absolute no go. It's going to be hard to push that deal out, and there's just not enough investor activity. So, had I known what I know now, I totally would have avoided it. So, that is why it's important to understand what market you're getting into because if you don't and you go into a rural area, you're going to make the same mistake that I did. So I'm trying to help you avoid making that mistake. So let's focus on why it's important, how to decipher what market to get into, what are the things that you need to look for, and what are some really good overall components to really consider. That is our main objection, really, in today's presentation. So you want to understand kind of what's going on in the market as a full picture goes. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. You want to look at the demographics, you want to look at how the economy is doing in that area, and even the government policies. And it sounds strange enough, But it's very true. Look at Oklahoma, look at Utah, Illinois. Like you've got a lot of different states out there that really regulate wholesaling very heavily. So you want to consider what state you're looking to get into and what are the regulations around wholesaling real estate, because that is going to determine really whether or not you're going to be able to get into that state and wholesale deals or not. Like Oklahoma, I would stay the hell away from Oklahoma because it's very heavily regulates wholesaling real estate. Unless you have the capacity to do a double close, then sure. But even then, I would still personally stay away from it because it's just not a super duper hot market. Oklahoma City is not a bad area, don't get me wrong, but it's just, in my opinion, it is not very attractive. Um, and I would just stay away for those reasons. Mainly because Oklahoma is very, very strict on regulating wholesaling. And that's pretty much like our major business plan. So that's extremely important. Now let's keep going. Actually, hold on. Before we move forward, why is the economy so important? You want to understand the market that you're getting into. You need to understand what that median income looks like. You need to understand how the overall employment rate looks in that area. The last thing you want to do is be in a market where the employment rate is extremely low, the median income is extremely low. Why? Because if you're in an area like this, it's a high risk area. What does a high risk area mean for an investor? Or what does it mean for you? It means if you get a deal locked up in a high risk area, the likelihood of you being able to find an investor that is willing to take on that high of a risk of an investment gets really, 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 really thin, super thin. So the only way, typically, if you're in a high risk area like that, the only way you're really going to be able to dispo a deal is if you have that property for pennies on the dollar. I mean, pennies on the dollar. So otherwise, it's just not going to be as attractive, and it's just going to yield. It's going to yield a lot more potential risks that are involved. And the last thing an investor wants to do is take on an investment that has a lot of risk. As an investor, you want to mitigate your risk as much as possible. So when you're investing in these high risk areas, you're doing the exact opposite. And don't get me wrong, the higher risk, higher reward, sure, if it goes well, but the likelihood of it going well becomes a lot more thin. So that's why it's important to understand the economic factors in the markets that you're currently looking at. That is very, very key. Now, demographics. Demographics plays a very important role as well, because if you're in Little Old Rockdale, Texas, that only has population of 10, 15,000 people, it's going to be a little bit hard to move that deal. Out of those 10 to 15,000 people, how many of them do you think are actually investors? Probably a very small handful. So demographics play a really, really big role, especially when it comes to the overall population growth. And not just the population growth for year over year, but even over a duration of years, right? So you want to look at, and we'll tackle more on this further into the slides, but you really want to look at the historical growth of a market. The area that you're getting into, is it steadily growing? Do you see jobs coming in? Do you see new employers coming in, or houses being built up like crazy? Do you see growth? That is the big question. Because if you don't see growth, if it's stagnant, if it is just complacent and it hasn't gone anywhere, you might want to stay the hell away from it, because the likelihood of you being able to get a solid deal is very, very slim. So you want to make sure that the area that you're looking at and getting into has good population growth, and it has a really strong current population. So typically, when you're looking for markets, you want to find a population count of at least 100,000 people. If you've got a population count of 100,000 people, you might be in a good spot, because there's a higher likelihood that 100,000 people is going to continue to grow over the next decade. So that's something you really want to consider and take into, just take that in consideration, because it is really important. Now, how do you find all this data out? Okay, I was pulling my hair out trying to figure out how to put this into a slideshow. There's a lot of different ways to do it. At the end of the day, there's tons of different ways to do it. One, really, you can go to Google and you can type in whatever it is you want to do. So, like, for example, we'll do Dallas. You can do like Dallas population growth or Dallas population trends, stuff like that. It's going to pull up a bunch of different data that you're going to be able to see from different sources. So you want to look at these things because, again, these all tie in to your population growth. It all ties into the economic growth, and it all ties into the employment rate as well. So you want to make sure that you have a solid understanding as to how these key indicators really look, because that is really going to determine whether or not you're in a good market or in a poor market. And the stronger your numbers are, for example, because you've got different location classes. I didn't put this in here. I should have. This is a nugget. This is a nugget. You have 3 location classes. You've got Class A, Class B, Class C. Okay. Very similar to like school, getting graded on a paper. Class A is going to be an area where there's very little value add opportunity for you, because these are going to be the areas where you're going to see a lot more like the median income for families is going to be significantly higher. Property values are going to be significantly higher. The overall subdivisions are going to be super nice. These are your Class A locations. Your Class B are kind of like your middle, I guess the middle ground, or what's the middle class? This is like the middle class for properties. So it could be in a nice subdivision. Your ARVs are going to be anywhere from like 250 to maybe 450. I would say that's a pretty good range. And these are going to be like areas where you can have a little bit of potential value add opportunities. So it could be a distressed property where you can come in, do some, minor renovations, put it back out on the market. It's also probably going to have some pretty decent rental comps as well. Properties would typically rent for about $2,000 on average or a little bit more. So these are going to be like your Class B locations. And for the most part, they're going to be in pretty good subdivisions. You might have a property here or there where it's got tall grass, or the landscaping's outgrown, or the property is just really distressed from street view. But for the most part, the rest of the subdivision is pretty well taken care of. That's a Class B location. Your Class C locations, these are going to be your areas where the property is in a much rougher condition. Not necessarily economic growth, but the economic trend in that area is going to be a little bit lower. So this is going to be more of like your, what's the word I'm looking for? Lower class areas. So these are going to be families that, are really grinding it out and just haven't really figured out how to, get the keys of the kingdom or whatever it is. But they're just rougher, older properties, usually built in like the 60s to the 1900s, and need tons of work, extremely distressed. The subdivisions are not the nicest. You've probably got some properties randomly built up where they're, like Class A properties, or they're brand new builds. And then you got some areas or some lots that are completely vacant, or you got some lots that have like a front porch and no property because it was torn down or there was a fire or whatever. So these are typically going to be like your Class C locations. This is where you're going to be able to add the absolute most value to a property, but they're also going to have lower rental rates as well. Why? Because in these areas, the vast majority of the families here cannot afford to have a high rent. They just can't. It's just very difficult for them to do it. And so typically, these are going to be the areas where you're seeing any rent going from anywhere from $1,100 to maybe $1,700, $1,800. So those are the 3 different location classes that you're typically going to run into when it comes to single family. For example, South Dallas. What kind of this is a great example, and I want y'all's feedback on this too. South Dallas, when you're looking at like not the Bishop Arts area, but a little bit closer to like 35 on like Illinois Avenue. What kind of class location do you think that is? Anybody? No worries. I'll tell you. It is a C class location. It's a C class location. When you get closer to the Bishop Arts area, in some parts of Bishop Arts, you'll see gentrification where it's starting to have a lot more new builds than the older historical properties. And so that's kind of a B class location where you see a good mixture of both because it's becoming more gentrified. And then when you have the properties where you got one new build or two new builds popping up here and there, and every other property there on that block or in that subdivision is typical or is fairly old, you're looking at a C class location. So these are really important indicators to really keep in mind and consider, because this is going to determine how much value you can really bring and how much value you can actually add, not just to the property, but also to the potential investor as well. And typically, you're going to have much bigger returns when you're dealing with B class properties and C class properties. Typically, with your A class properties, these are going to be the properties that are just like in absolute immaculate condition. It's hard to really justify a cash offer for these properties because they're just beautiful homes. And it's kind of a big slap in the face to the homeowners when you're throwing them this offer that's at 75% minus repairs, potential repairs, because to them, their property is worth probably $500,000 and they may not even be wrong. So there's not a whole lot of value add that you can bring to them or bring to sellers in A class property locations. So the vast majority of the value add you're going to be able to bring, again, is going to be B class and C class locations. And those two location classes are typically going to bring you the most bang for your buck. And those are usually going to be the areas where you're going to make the most money when you're doing wholesale. So it's very important to understand. Now, when you're doing your research, a really great tool to utilize and use is actually going to be, it is called ListSource. You can go to listsource.com. And when you go to listsource.com, you can you can really break it down to the specific zip codes. So there's a really great video by a gentleman named Max Maxwell. This is who I was listening to when I was on YouTube University. Oh, darn. And I will upload that for you guys so y'all have access to it too, because it is still very relevant. And the reason I'm saying it's very relevant is because this is going to show you what zip codes here in DFW have the most cash buyer activity. Why is that important? It's important because when you come in and you start wholesaling, you can break this down to a science. You really can. So you can come in, you can use ListSource, find out what zip codes are the absolute hottest, performing the most, have the most cash sells. And from that zip code, you can dive it further into what subdivisions are producing the most cash activity. And from there, you can start doing geofence targeting. And we'll talk about this later on, probably next week when we do lead generation. But you can start doing geofence targeting to that specific subdivision with your ads on Facebook, with your mailers, with bandit signs, with driving for dollars, like with cold calling, with cold texting, like it goes on and on. It really does. And when you do that, you're going to have a higher conversion rate overall because you reverse engineered the process. You see where the most activity is taking place, and when you understand where the more of the activity is taking place, you're going to inevitably have a higher conversion because it is showing you a pattern. And the pattern that it's showing you is that people in this area are more keen and more likely to sell their property cash than any other area in DFW. That is why it is so important to understand how to break it down and really why and how to dive into those areas. So I'll get that video uploaded because Max does a phenomenal job with breaking it down, explaining it, and how to use listsource.com to really be able to do that. Now, as far as your analytical tools, you do have GIS, CMAs, and investment calculators. I've got tons and tons of investment calculators, and I'm actually going to be sharing that within the group here pretty soon. I'm putting a whole Google Drive together with all of my resources, all of my contracts, everything that I have, my rehab estimates, all of it. I'm putting it all together for you guys so I can put it into this community so y'all all have access to it, and you don't have to struggle with finding these items or finding these resources because I have it all for you guys. Now, GIS. What the hell is GIS? Right. So your GIS, basically, it's a fancy way of saying all it is your geographical information systems. It's essentially a tool that's used really to kind of capture and analyze, even manage spatial or geographical data when it comes to real estate investing. And they can be extremely useful, especially when it comes to analyzing properties in terms of the location, proximity to amenities, the demographic trends. There's a few other spatial data points that it can also kind of bring up and help break down as well. So for GIS, there is a tool you can download. You have to go to the website and download it. It's free. It's called Quantum GIS. I'll also include a link in the chat for you guys, so y'all have that. But it's called Quantum GIS, and again, you can go in, you download it, and basically what it shows you is pretty much like everything that you need to see as far as the demographics go, and so forth. It's like it's a pretty powerful tool. It really is. So that would be great. And then as far as CMAs go, a CMA is just oh my gosh, it is a competitive market analysis. You can get a CMA from an agent, from a realtor for free typically. I personally wouldn't recommend it because most agents, if I'm being entirely transparent, most agents can't comp for shit. Like they cannot comp worth a damn at all. I was having a conversation with an agent today and I walked the property over in Carrollton, beautiful spot. It's in a really great location, but her ARV is it's actually, she's got about 730,000 for her ARV. And when she told me how she comped the property, she went out a whole mile, an entire mile away from the property and pulled different comps from different subdivisions. That's a big no-no. You do not want to do that. But the reason she did it was to understand the price per square foot in that area. But you don't want to do that. And the reason you don't want to do it is because you're going to shoot yourself in the foot later on. When you base things off of price per square foot, and we'll talk more about this in deal analysis and underwriting, but when you base your comps or your ARV off of price per square foot, you're either going to have too high of an ARV or you're going to have too low of an ARV. But regardless, your ARV is not going to be accurate and it is going to be complete trash if I'm being totally transparent. So stay away from price per square foot. That is an absolute last resort. Last resort. You do not want to go straight for it because that's like, yeah, don't do it. You're going to set yourself up for failure. Do not do it. So if you need an accurate CMA, if you really need an accurate CMA for any kind of property that you're running, there is an analysis channel in the community. It says need analysis. Put your property in there, make a post about it, tag myself, tag Savannah, tag Dre, tag anybody in the admin team on there. We'll take a look at it. We'll get with you and be able to run it together and give you an actual accurate CMA that has a much, much more accurate ARV. And for that property in Carrollton, my ARV was 665. So huge difference. Now field research. So basically what I'm talking about in field research is like why is it so valuable to really have boots on the ground in the markets that you're in? If you're doing this virtually, and let's say, for example, we'll use Canada. I've come across a lot of guys that are currently living in Canada, but they're wholesaling and investing here in DFW, San Antonio, Houston, Austin. The reason it is important to have boots on the ground is because that is going to give you the best understanding as to what is going on and how that market is going. Now, if you don't have availability to get boots on the ground, you can do this virtually if you just utilize Google. You can go to Google, type a property address in, and I do this every day because we buy property sight unseen. So I go to Google, type the property address in, I go to the street view, and I start driving around with my little clicker looking at the subdivision, because that is going to give me a really good idea as to what kind of location class that is going to be. So you can do this virtually, and if you do not have boots on the ground, do it virtually with Google. Now, I prefer to have boots on the ground. It's always better to have boots on the ground because now you can have somebody go out, actually take videos, take photos of the property, walk it for you, whatever it is, or even help you with access. So it's always good to have boots on the ground, and it's extremely valuable. So if you're able to connect with somebody that's in your market that is willing to do that for you, make that connection, because it is going to be a night and day difference. Okay, so what are some key factors when it comes to selecting the market that you're in? I cannot express this enough. Location, location, location. Okay, your location is extremely vital. Extremely vital. Properties sell for two reasons: location and pricing. If you've got a property in a really great location and it's not selling, it's because your price too damn high. But if a property is in a really terrible location, and if you've got a property that's in really just a bad spot, and you got it pennies on the dollar and it's still not moving, it's really because of the location. It's not pricing, it's location. So you want to make sure that you understand the location is probably one of the most vital aspects to wholesaling. This should be the first thing that you look for and you're aware of when you're getting into wholesaling, when you're selecting a market, because I can't express it, I can't emphasize it enough. It is important. Okay. It's also important to understand really what's around your subject property, such as amenities, right? What is attractive about your property? What kind of family would really bring, or what kind of family would buy your property if you were to flip it, right? That's really important. So if you've got a property that, let's say Arlington is a phenomenal area because you get so many different amenities. You've got Globe Life Field, you've got the AT&T Stadium, you've got Six Flags, you've got Hurricane Harbor. You have all of these different amenities around Arlington. So if you were to pick up a property in Arlington and you flipped it, because you want to think of like how the end buyer thinks sometimes, if you were to flip that property, what kind of buyer are you going to attract to that property? Most likely it's going to be a first-time home buyer with a family. That's going to be probably, I'd say, a good 80% of the people that come out and walk your property are going to be first-time home buyers with families. So understanding the amenities and what audience is going to attract is also really important when you're making these kind of investments as well. And this isn't just with wholesaling, but it's also when it comes to like flipping a property. Now, is it important with wholesaling? It really is, because the more dialed in you are with these concepts when it comes to wholesaling a property, and the more you're aware of these little nuances or these little details, the better chance you are going to have of being able to dispo the property at a nice, solid price. And what I mean by that is you've got a lot of wholesalers in DFW that are struggling to move things at 70, 75%. Can you imagine finding a buyer at 80%? Man, I was talking to one wholesaler not too long ago and told him, like, look, dude, we got buyers at 80% that are buying from us because we're so selective with where we pick properties up. And it's not just where we pick properties up, but we're also selective with the investors that we work with. We essentially cherry pick the investors that we do work with. And these are people that we have solid relationships with, and we understand their needs, their wants and their needs. When you can understand the wants and needs of your investors, you're going to understand how to better move a property. And so this all comes down to really understanding what they look for and the small little nuances that they consider. Amenities plays a big role as well. So that's kind of why I wanted to touch on that. Okay, so amenities are important, and then I wouldn't really dive too much into metro stations. There's not a whole lot, but parks, you can consider parks as well. Parks are important to consider because it can be a potential value add. It's not going to add any money to the value of your property, but it can become more desirable. It can make your property more desirable when there's a nice cleaned up park, right down the street from it, especially for a family or a first time home buyer that's got a small family. Because now he can take his kids, they can take their kids, go play at the park, wear them out, come home, and all they got to do is walk. Like that is a really big value add for that family. Like I've got 2 kids, so being able to take them to a park and wear them out really helps out a lot. The only problem is we don't have a park nearby. We have to drive to go to the closest park, and it's about 7 minutes. So it's not too far. I know it's like, Darion, 7 minutes. I know. But shit, I'd much rather have a park right down the street where I can just walk to it, be much nicer. So really important to consider those things because, again, they are important. So you've got, when it comes to accessibility, transportation links, again, this is kind of like metros and stuff like that. I wouldn't really be too concerned with it because the vast majority of the metros you're going to come into are usually around like Dallas, like really around Dallas. When you go into like Arlington, like the cities around DFW, you're not really going to dive too much into them, or you're going to not really see them all too often. So really wouldn't be too concerned about transportation like metros or anything like that for the most part. The schools, educational institutions are important as well. So and it also comes down to what kind of investment strategy you're trying to implement, right? So, and this allows you to think of deals when you're wholesaling properties from different standpoints. So if you have a single family home that's across an elementary school, then you can, assign that deal to a typical cash buyer where they could flip it, sell it to a first time home buyer who has a family and they could live there, forever, and their kids can go to school right there. But then if you have let's say you've got a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house pretty close to TCU. Well, this could be a potential pad split for an investor who focuses on pad splits, because now he can take these college students and make them rent out per room and cash flow that way. So he's not just cash flowing on long term, but he's also cash flowing on a midterm. So when you understand the different, audiences, when you understand the different audiences around the properties or around the subject property, you have different exit strategies that you can really think of on the investment side on the back end. And what it means for you as a wholesaler is it allows you to be a little bit more creative and see deals a little bit differently. So not every deal is the same. You don't have to have the same buyer for every single deal. And what I mean is, you can probably make more money wholesaling a deal to somebody of a potential pad split to a pad split buyer than a traditional cash buyer who's just going to flip the property, because they look at different metrics. And when they look at different metrics, their offers are going to be significantly different. A cash buyer is probably not going to offer as high as a pad split buyer who's looking at a property to do a pad split, because their returns are different. They look at, again, different metrics, and it allows that pad split buyer to offer more on the property than your traditional cash buyer who's looking to just do a flip. So understanding what educational institutions are around your subject property and also the type of property you have as far as bed, bath count, all that good stuff is really going to help you determine what kind of cash buyer you can market the deal to. 100%. So those are really important factors. Really, really important factors. Now, when it comes to supply and demand analysis, this is fairly simple, truthfully. Again, this is probably, you can get help from an agent on this, or you can really just go to Google and type it in, supply and demand of real estate supply and demand trends of Dallas, Texas, or real estate trends, or real estate supply and demand trends of Fort Worth, or whatever city it is that you're looking into. And I guarantee you're going to come across a lot of different links that are going to have a lot of different relative information that you can use. But the most accurate data that you're going to come across, and I say it's not the only accurate because it's really not even 100% accurate, but the most accurate is going to be the MLS. Now, why do I say it's not 100% accurate? Because not every property that sells on the MLS. So you've got hundreds of thousands of properties that are selling off of the MLS. And what does this mean? This means that it is not, the MLS is not going to track every sell, so it's not going to be 100% accurate. But what it does tell you is it shows you the data and it shows you the information of what is going on with the current market for the properties that are currently listed. That's important to understand. And so agents, or even investors who have MLS access, when they log in, it goes to their Matrix portal. In their Matrix portal, they have a tab called Trends. And so you can go into this tab and you can literally see every type of trend you can think of as far as supply and demand goes. You could look at average days on market. You could look at average properties expired per day. You can look at the average reductions made on every single day. You could look at the average listings per day versus the average closed properties per day. So you're able to see all these different ratios, which allows you to see these different trends. That is going to allow you to accurately assess what is going on in your market as far as the supply and demand really goes. Now, here in DFW, it's neither a seller's market or a buyer's market. It's actually pretty much right smack dead in the middle. Like, it is smack dead in the middle. I just looked at this yesterday, actually. So what does that mean? That means that, for example, back in 2020, when rates were stupid low, 2020, 2021, rates were extremely low. Man, the supply and demand was insane. You had a really massive demand of buyers, but you had a lower supply of sellers. And so that drove prices through the freaking roof. I remember putting an offer in on one deal. Actually, it was in Austin, and our offer was $165,000 over the asking price with no appraisal, with an appraisal waiver. So basically, what it means is if the appraisal came back lower than the offer price, the difference between the appraised value and the offer price, the buyer had to make up in cash. That is how drastic of a market it was then. Are you seeing that today? No, not at all. You're seeing crickets bouncing around. That's what you're seeing. And you're seeing tumbleweeds just, brush across the street because it is a much slower market today. Rates are stupid high. You're looking at 7.5%, 8% if you've got great credit. So rates are just super high right now. It doesn't make sense to go out and really, buy a property and hold on to it as a buy and hold investment because your PITI, your property taxes and insurance, are going to be way too much for the property to actually even be able to cash flow. So it just doesn't make sense to do the BRRRR methods. It doesn't make sense to really have a big or add properties onto your rental portfolio unless you buy creatively. But even then, it's still still risky. So the market changes drastically. And a great example is this. Last year, our appraisal value for our house was 287. This year, we just got our appraisal in this week. Our appraisal value is like 233. That's a massive difference. And truthfully, I'm actually ecstatic about it because it's like it saves me money, you know, like we're not having to spend so damn much money on taxes. I'm actually gonna, ironically, I am going to protest that and see if I can get those taxes even lower. So we'll see. But that's the difference between the market we're in today versus the market we were in last year. My property like lost appraisal value by like 50 grand in the matter of a couple of months. So understanding what that supply and demand analysis really looks like is also going to be very key when selecting the market that you really, really want to be in. Now, risk analysis. So what do you need to do when you're evaluating your risk in all these different real estate markets? Well, again, we kind of talked on the first one. Okay. This is extremely, and this is something, yeah, we already talked about it a little bit early on, and we also talked about it just actually like 2 seconds ago. The historical performance is really going to be really important, not just for the subdivision your property is in particularly, but the city or the town or the area that you're looking to get into. So if Dallas-Fort Worth is not your market, and let's say you're trying to go into El Paso, well, it's really important to understand how the historical performance of El Paso has been, right? So you want to break down the last 10 years of the demographic growth, the economic growth, and the employment rate. Those are like you want to take those into consideration. Has El Paso been on a trend, a big trend of growth over the last decade? Because if it hasn't, it's probably not going to be the best area to invest in as an investor or even to wholesale in, because it's going to be harder for you to find an investor who is actively investing in that area. Now, if the city of El Paso has just sprouted out and it's just shot up like a massive tree, and you've got massive economic growth, you've got massive population growth, massive demographic growth, then yes, El Paso may be a solid market to start doing investments in, and it may be a solid market to even start wholesaling real estate in as well. So you want to look at the historical performances of each market that you're getting into. So if you're trying to do this nationwide, you want to understand, one, again, regulations. What states heavily regulate wholesaling, because that is going to determine the states you stay out of and the states you're able to get into. Once you figure out what states are heavily or have heavily regulated wholesaling and you want to avoid those states, start looking into the states that you want to start diving into. Out of the states you want to dive into, what cities have shown significant growth in the last decade? What cities have shown significant growth in the last decade? These are going to be the cities that you're going to want to invest in. These are going to be the cities that you're going to want to wholesale in. Okay. Now, me personally, I also look at the political factor of the state as well. I will never, say now, I will never invest in a blue state. For example, California. I won't invest in California because their laws and their regulations are so damn dumb. It makes zero sense. I want to have an investment where it's not only sound, but I'm also able to have a more likelihood of having a buyer come in and buy the property from me. Doing that in California, you got a lot more people leaving California than you do going to California. Hell, even Elon Musk brought Tesla over to Austin. So little stuff like that you want to pay attention to, and you want to understand what is going on in these states as far as their political stances, because believe it or not, that is important. It is extremely, extremely important. You're going to have a lot more freedoms, you're going to have a lot more benefits in red states than you will in blue states, because red states are more pro, what's the word I'm looking for? They're more pro capitalism. Blue states are not. So it's extremely important to understand the political factors that play a role in the states that you want to get into, because it's going to be important on your investment. It's not just going to be important on your investment, but it's going to dictate the likelihood of you being able to move a property based off of the average days on market. I guarantee you, if we really broke it down and looked at it, you're going to have much higher days on market in blue states than you would in red states. I can almost promise. So very important. Again, can't stress it enough. Economic risk. These are very, very important to understand as well. You don't want to be in an area where the average household median income is $30,000. That's probably not going to be the best place to park an investment. Period. Okay. Don't want to do it. You don't want to do it because you're going to have a lot more high risk tenants. You're going to have a lot more high risk buyers. So depending on your exit strategy, if you flip a property, you're probably not going to get what you're wanting for it anyways. And then if you're renting a property, well, there's a good likelihood that you might lose out on money when it comes to rent, because the second they hit hardships is the second you are going to stop receiving your payments on your rent. So understanding the economic factors in your market, again, are extremely important. And it's not just important for your investment as an investor doing a fix and flip or buy and hold, but it's important to you as a wholesaler, because the lower the economic or the lower the average household median income is for that area, the less likelihood you're going to be able to find a solid buyer to sign the deal to begin with, because it's just going to be a high risk area, which is kind of what we covered again earlier on. Now, another thing, also really important, is the environmental factors that take play. For example, Florida. What does Florida go through every single year? Florida goes through hurricane season every single year. Hell, they even have to deal with typhoons sometimes. So understanding the environmental roles or the environmental risk that come with the location is also important. What about DFW? DFW, Oklahoma are known for tornadoes. This is Tornado Alley, okay? Now, the likelihood of your property getting hit by a tornado is still very slim, but you need to be aware that that could be a potential possibility. Now, Houston is another great area. What is Houston faced with every single year? Hurricane season. Faces with hurricane season. Houston, as we all know, has been known to flood. Houston, pretty much all of Houston is basically in a flood zone. It really is. So does it make sense to pick up properties in Houston for you? That's something that you have to figure out. I will tell you, wholesaling properties in Houston, if you're in a good area of Houston, it really shouldn't be hard. Houston is a really, really, really hot market. But you also want to understand, if you're an investor, if you're planning on building a portfolio and you want some properties out in Houston, be prepared for those hurricanes and for those floods, because they do come and they do happen. And I got family in Houston, so I also know from experience. Very important factors to consider. Okay. Now, strategies. How do you get into a market, right? How do you enter into the markets that you want to get into? First off, you got to figure out really what kind of property you want to start diving into, because you've got a list. You've got tons and tons of things. You want to understand, and this isn't just speaking from a wholesaling standpoint, this is speaking from an investment standpoint. You want to understand your exit strategy and your property types. What kind of properties do you want, and what is your exit strategy with those properties? That is going to determine really how you come into the market. So if you're wholesaling, right now, wholesaling is like everybody's bread and butter is single family. So if you focus on single family housing or single family houses, perfect. That's your niche. That is your market. You're looking at this market, let's say DFW, you're in DFW and you're focused on single family housing. Okay. This is really important to understand, guys. And the reason it's important is because this is really going to help you understand whether or not you're going to be able to hit or make an ROI as well. So, really key, know what you want to get into before you get into it. All this stuff really needs to be broken down and considered. Okay. Now, kind of tying back into, man, I really hit the nail on the head earlier. Kind of tying back into what we had covered earlier. Identifying hot zip codes. Okay. This is going to allow you to capitalize the most on the areas where you're going to see the most growth. This is going to allow you to capitalize and really break this down again to a science to target areas where you're going to see the most potential sellers part ways with their properties. What does that mean for you? That means more deals for you. That means more money in your pocket. That means more people you're able to service, more people you're able to help. So it is important to understand what zip codes are hot. In those zip codes, what subdivisions are hot, and dive into it. Just start farming the hell out of that subdivision because that is really, really important. That's going to allow you to build consistency and flow and revenue. It's going to help you understand what your market cycle looks like. It's going to help you understand what your ROI looks like. There's a lot of different things. It's really important. Now, how do you determine the true market value of properties? Again, CMAs. CMAs go a very, very long ways, and they are very, very helpful. Do not, and I keep hearing people make the same mistake, do not use Zillow or Redfin to run comps because they are not comps. They're not comps. Those are not sold properties. Texas, if you're in Texas, one of the few, unfortunately, is a non-disclosure state. What does that mean? It means that Texas, the homeowners do not need to disclose what their property is sold for. So unless you have access to the MLS or you have access to Propelio or to Privy, you're not going to understand what these properties sold for. Thus, you're not going to know, or you're not going to have the ability to accurately run any kind of comps. Using Zestimates to determine the property value is not a good idea. Zestimates, Redfin values, none of those, Trulia, HAR, none of those are great. Now, unless it's a last case resort and you just cannot find ARV, you can I say this with caution. You can use a Zestimate. Just take off like $60K from that Zestimate and then run your numbers. That should make sure that you're okay. So worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, you can look at Zestimate, take off 60 grand, and then run your numbers. So for example, if Zestimate says $300,000, you're going to have an ARV of $240,000. And then you're going to run your numbers that way. Okay. But again, do that with caution. But for the most part, you should be okay. So as far as getting actual assessments, either get with an investor who knows how to accurately run comps, get a CMA pulled, get an accurate ARV, or get Propelio. It's 14 days for free, and you can change out the emails how many different times. So if you got 19 different emails, perfect. So use Propelio, use Privy, use really those are the only two that I can think of. Those are the only two I can think of because those are the only two I've heard good things about. And I use Propelio for outside of DFW. So Propelio is a really great source. All right. Now that pretty much sums up everything that's everything that we talked about. And to wrap everything up, when you're determining your markets, location is the most important aspect, period. Location. Understanding location types or location classes is a really big help. Again, there's A class, B class, and C class. You can take it a step further and you can start researching property classes because you have location class and you have property class. So the more you understand these two items and these two things, the more you're going to understand of how much of a value add you are able to create for that property, so as far as wholesaling it goes, and even flipping it. So location, location, location. Never never underestimate location. When you're diving into your market, you need to figure out the economic growth, you need to figure out the population growth, and you need to figure out the demographic growth. Never wholesale a property that has less than, really, this is my personal reference, I would not wholesale a property, or I wouldn't recommend anybody to wholesale property unless you have a really good dispositions like we do, where the population growth is less than 100,000 people. If you're doing this solo, if you're writing this on your own, do yourself a favor, stay out of those locations because it's going to be harder to dispo a deal. You have very selective buyers in those markets. So find locations where the population growth is over 100,000 people. Find locations or break down the hottest zip codes in your market utilizing ListSource. From those zip codes, start diving in to the subdivisions. Out of those subdivisions, which one have the most cash offers? And start farming. This is essentially geofencing. Start farming those subdivisions. That is important. What else is there? That's really pretty much it. Economic growth, population growth, and demographic growth are going to be the biggest indicators, the biggest factors you really need to consider when selecting a market. And also understanding the environmental hazards that may come with that market as well, because that is also going to be important too. You never want to underestimate those things. So all of those things are going to be very, very important. Does anybody have any questions? Because that was a lot of information.
Yes, I got one. Let me pull over real quick, though. Oh, well, yeah, I'm on a bumpy block. Hold on, bro.
No, there you go.
I'm about to pull over just a second. Okay, on the class. All right, so when you mentioned the class area out there on the south side of Dallas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I know all of the South Dallas is not C class. With the tool that you're talking about, will we be able to target within the south side of Dallas for the neighborhoods that are doing well? And do you suggest doing that, being that the surrounding areas are C class and may not be a good investment for even finding a decent area over there and investing over there?
It's a really great question. South Dallas is very tricky. It's because of Bishop Arts. The Bishop Arts area itself is very, what's the word, delicate. And what I mean is you can have two different subdivisions right across the street from each other. And you got properties selling for 600 plus in the left subdivision. And then you got properties selling for 250, 350,000 in the right subdivision. So there's a big difference in those subs. So when you're running a property or subject property, or you're analyzing a subject property in Bishop Arts, you want to be extremely conservative with your numbers, especially your ARV, and you want to be a little bit higher on the higher end of your reno costs, because the vast majority of those properties were built in the 20s. And not only that, but a lot of them are historical properties. So, and you know what we learned from experience is when it comes to historical properties, you want to over budget on that renovation cost, because that's going to play a really important factor. I wouldn't say stay away from it for the most part, but I would say tread carefully and tread with caution in that market, in that particular area, like the Bishop Arts area, because it's so volatile. It's pretty much everywhere. You've got prices that are super low, and you got shit that's over $1 million. It's nuts. And then you have individuals or sellers who are listing their homes or their lots for sale. I actually looked at one this morning. They're listing their lots for sale for the lowest listed lot was $275,000, and it was 6,600 square feet. That is insane. That is nuts. And they're all sitting on the market. Like none of those properties have moved. The only one that's closed in the last 365 days sold for 195 grand. They had it at 225 and they sold it at 95 or 195. So you've got to be very careful with that area as well. And then not every lot is, you also want to consider zoning. And here's why. If you have a property that's got a good sized lot, but it's zoned as mixed use, shit, you can turn down that property and build up condos or build up townhomes 4 at a time. And that would be, a really great investment, but it's also going to be extremely costly. And that's going to require a specific kind of buyer. So there's so much going on in that little area. There's a lot you can do with it, and it really comes down to the overall buyers you're marketing to. And it's just it's a tricky spot, man. It really is. South Dallas is a tricky spot. If you're on the other side of 35 by like the Dallas Zoo, that's pretty cookie cutter. Like that area is cookie cutter. We've got a dude over there buying really, really nicely. So we've done tons of deals with him as well, and he just loves that area. But the Bishop Arts, man, like that particular area, don't hit, like, I wouldn't say stay away from it, but I wouldn't actively look for properties in that part of Dallas for that particular reason, especially if you're wholesaling, because it's going to be pretty tough to wholesale. For whatever reason, you got a lot of properties over there that have high days on market. Even properties that were currently flipped and they did a really beautiful job in renovations, they've got a really high day on market. So that's something you're going to want to consider and really take into consideration. Does that make sense?
Yes, the reason why I'm asking this question is because I found an area over there that's being regentrified, kind of like the Como area. The surrounding areas are not coming up though. So that's what made me be a little hesitant on even looking over there, because the surrounding areas just, it's between Lancaster and it's, how it is over there. So I was like, okay, what they building over here, are they about to do the whole area? But it don't look like it. And I know what gentrification look like. They start on the outside and then they do all the streets and the sewers and all of that, and they work their way in. Yeah. So I think it's just investors over there finding lots and building on them versus the whole area being gentrified. So that's the reason for the question.
Yeah. Now that makes sense too, because I had one sent to me earlier this morning. This is when I was talking about it. I looked at and basically the gentleman and his wife were asking my thoughts on ARV and what they should offer on the property, because they had a verbal agreement already in place with the seller. And they came in at 370, and they believed the property was worth over $500,000 based off of what they were seeing in the area. Well, when I dove into it, ARV was 370. So they literally offered and it was just way, way too much. And the property was listed at 490. So they thought they were getting a killer of a deal, but they're not. There's not a lot of gentrification going on. Out of the last 365 days, a half a mile away from the subject property, you only have one new build, and it's not even sold. It was active. So that to me is a big red flag as far as like letting me know kind of what's going on in that particular subdivision or that particular market. And when you're looking at ARV comps, there's a beautiful, beautiful comparable property, very similar to the construction type as to the subject property, and only sold for 365, and it was a little bit smaller. So I ended up putting ARV at 370 because the subject property is bigger. But even then, when you look at the cost renovations and MAO, their MAO is like 200, I think 207. No, MAO was 209. No, it's 217. That's what it was. 217, because if they wanted to make 10K, they would offer 207, and if they wanted to make 20K, they'd offer 197. And so when we did that and looked at it, he's like, dude, I'm so glad we looked at this together because, you know, it would have shot us in the foot. And I was like, well, I'm glad I was able to save you guys a little bit of a headache. But yeah, so that area is just, it's a little tricky. But and you hit the nail on the head, man. Like if you're not seeing population, or if you're not seeing new builds pop up like that, just kind of look at it with a little bit more caution.
Got it. Makes sense.
Sweet. Blake, what do you got, bro?
So my question, it was, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. My question was very similar to what Dre had about going for the B or the C type class areas. Because you know what we're looking for is essentially distressed properties, and you would find that more in a Class C area. But y'all answer my question. It's like if there's no growth over there, there's nothing going on. There's no reason to even try to dive into those areas too much. Just to try to kind of stay in the B class type areas. Maybe not even so much distressed properties, just properties needing 2024 updates and stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%, man. So your best, the best bang you're always going to get for your buck, man, is always going to be B class locations with like B to C class property types.
Gotcha.
If you're able to find a B class location and you happen to come across a property that does need quite a bit of work done to it, that's gold, dude. And the reason it's gold is because you're going to be able to add the most value to the property, but it's also going to sell for a good, decent price as well. As opposed to it being in like a C class location where, let's say, ARV is 195 and the property needs 65 grand worth of work, you're going to have to get it for pennies on the dollar, and your assignment isn't going to be very big. I mean, it could be,
right,
but the likelihood of it happening is very slim. And here's a great example. So the sub-2 student that I did the deal with back in March, that made 80 grand on his first deal. The property he had was in Mansfield. So the location was solid. It was in a really good subdivision, but it needed a lot of work, man. A lot of work. And so that's why he was able to get it for so cheap. He got it for 65 and assigned it to us at 145. So he made 80 grand. And we helped him with the process, but he made 80 grand for his first deal. And it's because he found a property that needs tons of work in a really good location. So if you're going to focus anywhere, put a lot of your attention, and we'll talk more about this when we go in like for lead gen next week, but if you're going to put a lot of attention on these properties or in the wholesaling, man, be in these really good locations where you have the potential to find some really distressed properties, because it's going to be killer every time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I need to dive more into like my research of all the cities around DFW area. Cause I'm out from East Texas, man. Y'all been living out there for your whole lives or longer, you know. So I'm not super familiar. I mean, I went out to Dallas, but everything out at Dallas is Dallas to me. I don't know all these little sub cities all around. There's a ton of them. So I need to dive more in and kind of do more research on my end on the new growing cities around that area.
Yeah, man. Your market is, the market you go into is really going to be it's very vital, dude. It's extremely vital to your business because, like, for example, I was talking to a wholesaler that's in San Antonio, and we're talking about the differences between San Antonio's market and Dallas's market. And he asked me which one I preferred, and I told him DFW. And so when he asked me why, It's because the average assignment in DFW is going to be bigger than the average assignment in San Antonio.
Yeah.
San Antonio is great when it comes to population growth, but the overall median income just isn't as strong as Dallas is. And Dallas has a stronger population growth, it has a stronger economic growth, and it has a stronger demographic growth. So you're able to get more bang for your buck here in DFW than you are in San Antonio. So when you're looking at these markets, that's something I'm telling you, man, you really, really want to take that into factor because it's really important, dude. It's really important.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Do anybody else have any other questions? Sweet. Everybody good to go? Cool, man.
Good, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, brother. I'll include the link for the YouTube video for this source by Max. Probably not in the chat, but I'll put it into the community. So I'll get tagged in on there. But other than that, I think this is a pretty solid session. And if you guys have any questions for me, let me know.
Yes, sir. We'll do. Appreciate you.
Cool. All right. Later, y'all.